Have you ever wondered why some people just seem to effortlessly make the right decisions, while others constantly struggle, making the exact same mistakes over and over again? Well, welcome everyone to this explainer. Today, we're exploring the absolutely brilliant mind of the late Charlie Munger, the legendary vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. We're going to unpack exactly how Munger achieved this incredible, almost unfair cognitive edge in both life and business. And listen, he didn't do it just by having the highest IQ in the room. He did it by combining multidisciplinary wisdom into a powerful, completely unstoppable decision-making machine.
Okay, let's dive into this. Munger loved this old saying, and it's basically the foundation of his entire philosophy. He believed that if you only have one or two mental models that you rely on, human psychology will literally force you to torture reality until it fits your limited worldview. Right? Like if you only know economics, you're going to try to solve a human morale problem with a spreadsheet, completely ignoring the messy emotions involved. Munger was wildly successful because he flat out refused to carry just one narrow hammer. Instead, he built this massive, diverse toolbox in his head.
So here is our roadmap for today. We've got 5 key areas. First, the latticework of wisdom. Second, the psychology of misjudgment. Third, microeconomics and moats. Fourth, the pari mutual market. And finally, the art of waiting. Now, Munger operated by what he playfully called grandma's rule, which simply means you have to eat your carrots before you get your dessert. So we're going to eat our carrots of basic worldly wisdom, things like psychology, economics, and math, before we get to the sweet, sweet dessert of stock picking and market secrets.
All right, Section 1, the latticework of wisdom. Let's start with those carrots and build our fundamental framework of knowledge. Now, what's really interesting about this is the word interconnected. Munger pointed out that you can't really know anything if you just memorize isolated facts to cram for a test. People who do that, they tend to fail in school, and honestly, they fail in life. For wisdom to actually be usable, facts have to hang together on a latticework of theory in your head. So what does that mean practically? It means when you learn a new concept in, say, biology, you don't just memorize it. You ask, okay, how does this apply to sociology or to business? You array your experiences onto this mental latticework so they compound over time into a devastatingly effective predictive engine. Now you might be thinking, man, this sounds exhausting. Do I need a PhD in literally everything? The answer is no, which is great news for those of us who barely survived high school chemistry. Becoming worldly wise is absolutely doable because Munger calculated that just 80 to 90 important models carry about 90% of the heavy lifting, and of those, just a handful carry the most weight.
To actually use this latticework, Munger had a superpower we can call the rule of 3 models. He never attacked a problem using just one discipline. He would triangulate reality. He'd mix a psychological bias with an economic incentive and throw in a mathematical probability. When these models align, they create what he famously called massive Lollapalooza effects, where the outcomes are just disproportionately huge. Why does this matter to us? Because it's a secret to getting an unfair advantage in your own career. You don't have to be the best engineer or the absolute best salesperson on earth. If you combine solid engineering with sales psychology and some economic theory, you become a Lollapalooza yourself. You become unstoppable. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 2, the psychology of misjudgment. This is all about navigating the incredibly messy complications of our flawed human brains. Munger actually believes psychology was the most ungodly important subject for worldly wisdom. Because our brains only have so much circuitry, they take automatic shortcuts. To combat this, Munger used a brilliant 2-track analysis. Track 1 is cold, hard rationality. You calculate the real interests, the math, the expected value, kind of like evaluating if a bridge is structurally sound. But track 2, that is where the real edge lives. That's analyzing the psychological factors, the sneaky biases, and the subconscious shortcuts that cause people to severely malfunction and make terrible decisions. For instance, have you ever bought something you absolutely did not need just because a giant sign screams sale ends in 10 minutes? Yeah, we all have. That is your track 2 malfunctioning due to a scarcity bias, completely overriding your rational track 1 budget. And this brilliantly illustrates how track 2 thinking solves massive, real-world problems. Take this incredible story about Federal Express. The absolute heart of their business was flying all their planes to one central hub, sorting packages in the dead of night, and flying them back out. But they were constantly getting hit with massive delays. Management tried everything. Pep talks, threats, you name it. Nothing worked. Finally, someone realized the core incentive was entirely backward. They were paying workers by the hour. They were subconsciously incentivizing their team to take a long time. The literal moment they shifted to paying per shift, meaning workers could go home the exact second the sorting was done, the problems vanished overnight.
Getting incentives right is the ultimate psychological model. All right, Section 3, Microeconomics and Moats. Now we're shifting from the psychology inside our heads out into the playground of business and microeconomics.
Munger loved to view the free market economy as an ecosystem. Just like animals flourish by specializing in very narrow niches, businesses do exactly the same thing. But the really huge opportunities come from what he called surfing. Think about National Cash Register back in the early days. The founder, John Patterson, saw this crude new invention called a cash register, realized it physically stopped his retail employees from stealing from the till, and instantly bought up the patents and distribution. He caught a technological wave, hopped on his surfboard, and rode it for massive long-term advantages. When you find a business surfing a wave like that, the economic momentum is just breathtaking. Understanding this ecosystem actually triggered a massive shift in how Munger and Buffett invested. You see, the classic Ben Graham approach was kind of like running a Geiger counter over market rubble. You're looking for heavily discounted, mediocre businesses, what they called cigar butts, that just had one free puff left in them. And hey, it worked for a while. But Munger and Buffett eventually realized that the real life-changing money is made by buying high-quality businesses with strong momentum and great economics and just riding them for decades. And this applies way beyond the stock market. Think about your own life. Whether you're picking a career path, choosing a business partner, or starting a project, it's infinitely better to attach yourself to high-quality momentum than wasting time trying to salvage mediocre cigar butts.
Section 4, the pari mutual market. We did it. We ate our carrots. We understand mental models, psychology, and ecosystems. We have finally reached the dessert, stock picking. To really understand the stock market, Munger uses the metaphor of the pari mutual racetrack. At a racetrack, the odds constantly change based on what everyone else is betting. It's a true market. But consistently beating the horses is nearly impossible. Why? Because the house takes a devastating 17% cut right off the top. You can't just be a little smarter than the other bettors, you have to be so incredibly smart that you can overcome that massive 17% friction. So the crucial point is this. The stock market is exactly like that racetrack. It's mostly efficient. But because the house take, meaning the transaction costs, the bid-ask spreads, the commissions, is drastically lower than 17%, it actually becomes a beatable game. A highly disciplined, fanatical person, and by fanatical, I mean someone who's actually done the hard work to build that interconnected latticework of mental models we talked about, that kind of person can sift through the world, spot mispriced bets, find a genuine edge, and absolutely win. And that brings us to Section 5, the art of waiting. This is the final, ultimate secret to actually operating inside this complex, pari-mutual market. If you look closely at the few people who actually beat the racetrack and the few who actually beat the stock market, they all share one incredibly simple operational strategy. Step 1, they bet very seldom. They just wait patiently. Step 2, when the world finally offers them a mispriced bet, when they find an insight they are highly confident in, they load up heavily. And Step 3, they sit back and do absolutely nothing. I mean, think about how totally countercultural that is today. We live in an era of nonstop Robinhood alerts, day trading apps, and this overwhelming urge to always be doing something. But Munger says no. The way to win is to work tirelessly to find a few rare insights, bet big, and then just sit there. And why is sitting back so critically important? Well, aside from saving a fortune on broker fees, it all comes down to the math of compounding and taxes. Just look at the dramatic difference in these after-tax returns. If you actively trade and pay, say, a 35% tax on your gains every single year, a 15% return drops to just 9.75% after taxes. But if you buy a stellar business, sit back, and defer that exact same 35% tax to the very end of a 30-year period, your after-tax return jumps to 13.3%. That difference of over 3.5% per year, compounding over decades, is mind-blowing. The government is essentially handing you a massive mathematical advantage just for being patient and doing nothing. I want to leave you with this provocative thought experiment that Munger shared, which originally came from Warren Buffett. Imagine, right now, you are given a ticket with only 20 punches for your entire life. Every time you make an investment, you punch a hole. Once you've punched 20 holes, that's it. You can never make another investment again. Under those rules, there's no way you'd day trade. You would think incredibly carefully, you'd wait patiently for years if you had to, and when you finally punched a hole, you would load up. Extreme selectivity and patience are the ultimate products of true worldly wisdom. So the question is, what is your next punch going to be?
Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the phenomenal mind of Charlie Munger. Keep building that lattice work, and I'll catch you next time.